Just a little bit about me personally. My wife and I have been married for 15, going on 16 years. And we got 3 boys. Our oldest is 13, our middle guy is 11, and our youngest is 9. And so they're growing up quick, and people ask, like, what's going on at home? Like, how's life at home? And it's crazy and fun and exciting, as you guys can imagine, with the 3 boys that we have, but just sweet young men. And it's an honor to be a dad for them and just see what God's doing. We're just kind of in a sweet season of being a family, and sweet times in the Lord as they're getting older and maturing and able to process more things. It's just been just a fun stage that we're at. So it's just a little bit about me and my family. But over the last 8 years, moved back here to Michigan to help start a church, Redemption Church, over here in one of the suburbs of Grand Rapids. And before that, for about 7 years, we were involved in a church plant out in Arizona, in Prescott Valley, which is about an hour and a half north of Phoenix. And so really the greater part of the last 15 plus years have been church planting. And it's been incredible to see what God's done through that. And just from the church in Arizona to here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with Josh Tovey, like we mentioned Owasso earlier, Rick, but I was over there with Josh Tovey. So we started this church over here in Grand Rapids, and God's just done some crazy things. And so we were there, and we were able to come alongside and really cheer on Jameson, who we're one of his sending churches. And so we're really excited about that. But also who showed up was a guy named Seth Springs. He was at a residency with us, and we sent him out about 3 years ago. And then also with us there was another guy that we're bringing in, just started, that he'll be with us for about 2 years, that we're training up, because he's been called to go out and plant a church as well too. And so just, it was neat to sit there in that room and to see 4 different churches just kind of all associated there with just with what God has graciously done at and through Redemption. And so church planting, I love it. It's amazing to see what God does through church planting and revitalization. You can even see that as well too, as I know you guys do. But my role with Send Network is, it's like, what do you do as a church planting catalyst? Well, I guess really the easiest way to explain it is I help catalyze church planting in our state. And so really what that breaks down to is coming alongside churches, coming alongside pastors, even associations, to really help churches discover church planters, develop church planters, and deploy church planters. And so that's really the breakdown of my role: discovering, developing, and deploying. And my role really is overseeing all of those things in Michigan, everywhere outside of Detroit. And so we've got some guys in my role. One guy is full-time, Tim Schrader. I don't know if you know that name. So he's a church planting catalyst in Detroit. And then we got a part-time guy in Detroit as well too, Ken Neither. I don't know if you know that name. And then myself, I'm everything outside of Detroit, including the UP. And so it's a big area, but really we broke it down that way because there's 4.5 million people that live in Detroit. And then there's 4.5 million people that live outside of Detroit. And so people-wise, it breaks down evenly. Population-wise, it's massive, my area. So it's like, man, I can be here in Grand Rapids and drive 8 hours to a guy in the UP and get to meet with David Whitaker up there, right? And so that has its pros and its obstacles as well too, as you could imagine. But just really getting down to it, for us in the Send Network, our vision is to see a healthy, multiplying church in every community throughout North America, but specifically here throughout Michigan. So a healthy church, a multiplying church in every community throughout our state. And so as you guys know, that's really, like, for us in the Send Network, North American Mission Board, that's something that's way beyond us, which is a good thing, because it causes us to have a crazy, radical reliance, dependence upon the Lord to do what only He can do. And so really what I've seen, guys, is that, like, discover church planners, develop church planners, deploy church planners, but I've never like prayer. That's the big part of my role, like praying for God to send out more planters, but then also the ones that I get to serve and work with, just praying with them, encouraging them, supporting them. And so that's a little bit about my role, and really even Send Network, where we're going, just to see a healthy multiplying church in every community throughout our state. And so if there's not a healthy or a multiplying church in a community in our state, that's a target area for us. And so as you know, there's lots of areas that could use a healthy and a multiplying church, right? And so we would love to see God just do something that's really beyond us, that is really only attainable of him doing what he's going to do, him building his church, but us as pastors and churches coming together, because we need to do this together, coming together like you guys have there in the Bay Area, just to see God do and be a part of what it is that he's doing. And so that's a little bit about me and my role. I don't know if that's helpful, but then maybe, David, and you can let me know, but from there's really like, okay, if it's church planting, like for really, like my role breaks down into, there's this pipeline that leads to hopefully raising up more planters. But then as we have planters that feel called to plant a church, then we have this pathway of where planters go down. And so it's kind of a pipeline and a pathway, if that makes sense. And I can explain those two different things. But I can also, I think it could be good to just kind of pause and see if you guys got any questions on anything that I kind of talked about up to this point.
Anything from you, Rick?
I guess one question would be, how does replanting fit into that?
For sure. I mean, as you guys know, I think as we look throughout our state, we see that there's many opportunities for replanting. There's many opportunities for, I think that gets after too, man, we want to see a healthy multiplying church. And so there's definitely opportunities to see, just Rick, as you're talking about, maybe something that's on the decline or has plateaued or is dying, whatever the current state of that church is, to see really what it looks like to bring in maybe somebody, a new leader, new pastor to help bring more health, or to just kind of, hey, what's it look like to get after multiplication together? And I say that in a very like, wow, that sounds easy and simple. And we all know that's tough. That's years, right? In some situations, but coming together, it's like, I think there are some aspects, some similarities of planting and replanting, but then I also know that there are not similarities as well too. I think some of the core tenets are there, but some ways it's radically different, taking something, planting where there's nothing, and planting something new, to, replanting where there's, something, maybe some existing, but some shifting, obviously. Those are some of the bigger differences, but also some similarities as well too, as you're implementing maybe some new DNA or some new vision or some new mission there into the context.
Yeah. So what if anything, do you have to do with replanting?
For me? Yeah. So for us, we have, and I'll get into this a little bit later as it relates to like our pathway, but we have an assessment process. And so for the whole assessment process that we do with our planters, replanters can also go through that as well too. And so that's a huge aspect of really, if there's a guy that's like in your area that of, that's like, man, I'm interested in replanting or jumping in and being a part of that, we can take that couple through the assessment process and really get into, where he's at, his calling, his leadership, all of these things that we assess our planters, can also do that for the replanting side of things as well too. We just on our end just need to, as we go to NAM, say, hey, we're bringing this guy in, we just have to communicate he's coming in and he's going through assessment as a replanter, not a planter. And so it changes up the questions conversation a little bit. Just gives the assessors more of a kind of like a grid of like, okay, this guy's coming in this way. But that's one of the ways. For me, it's like I'd love to, as we see, I've been in this role for just over a year, and so hopefully, Lord willing, as things keep going, that we'll see here in our state that there's many churches that are raising up more leaders, and more pastors and more potential planters. And hopefully as we see that happening more and more, that we could have, maybe it'd be awesome to have a reservoir of more men that are called into planting, replanting, pastoring here in our state, that as that's happening, that now we can look around our state and be like, hey, we need one over here in the, in the Bay Area, and one over here in West Michigan, and one over here in Detroit.
Right.
And we can collectively do that together here in a more healthy way in our state. But that's maybe something that's a little bit more down the
road. Rick?
Yeah. First off, David, how do you pronounce Nate's last name?
Urgaitis.
Urgaitis.
Yep.
So Matt, have you spoken to Nate Urgaitis?
Yeah, I'm working with him right now.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, working with him right now. He just jumped in, expressed interest that he was interested in planting a church. And so it's really, all right, going through the assessment process.
Good.
Like part of my role is Rick, I'm working with guys that are like, I think I'm kind of praying maybe about church planting. Okay, so I'm working from a guy that's there all the way through, getting them to assessment, get them up to what's it look like to start a church, launch a church, and then 4 or 5 years after launch. So everywhere from like maybe considering all the way to like birthing a church, starting a church, to 4 or 5 years after launch day. And so as you guys know, there's a lot of things that happen, in that whole process. And so it's working with guys that are all over the board, but really I love it because I get to work with leaders. I get to work with pastors. I get to work with guys that they believe that God has called them into ministry, into pastoring, into planting. And part of, working with planters is they have, like, what I love, that there is this bold faith that they have, that they believe that God has called them to do this in this area, to reach this community. And I get to come alongside. I'm like a system structure guy. It's just kind of how my mind works. And so I get to come alongside and help a lot of visionaries maybe get a little bit more boots on the ground and some steps in line to go towards really what God has called them to.
That's great. I've met Nate several months ago, and he's had a connection with Emmanuel. I guess he did supply preaching many months ago. And we just had him at Emmanuel a couple of weeks ago to lead worship. He and his friend Kit. And he is talking about a location for a Bible study. And he asked if Emmanuel would be open to that. And I think they would. So I asked him to get together with David and write up some kind of proposal, because, I'm still the outsider at Emmanuel. If I were to go to the leadership at Emmanuel and say, you know who Nate is, he wants to have a Bible study in the building on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, what do you think? They would ask me questions that I don't know the answers to. So that's why, David, I don't know if he's contacted you and told you that I asked him to do that.
He did, and we're going to set aside a time where we can talk about that, and then then we'll move on from that. But that's a great idea.
It doesn't, the write-up doesn't have to be 100%, all the details and all that, but it has to be enough for them to, intellectually consider, what he's performing. And I think it's a great idea. And we may have some of our members who would want to attend that, since we don't have a Sunday evening service.
That's right. Maybe.
So looking forward to seeing what that would do. And I know that probably some in the church would consider him as a possible candidate for pastor at Emmanuel. So not at this time though. So I don't know, as we talked to him about Nate having a Bible study in the building, that, well, this isn't step one towards this, but it's a Bible study in the building.
So Matt, you mentioned 3 things in your text to me the other day. One was multiplication pipeline, and then church planting training and church planting pathway. I think some of our guys would particularly be interested in the multiplication pipeline. And then we do want to hear more about the others, but what can you tell us about that?
For sure. So
or even show us if you need to.
So the multiplication pipeline really is It's a tool for any Southern Baptist church can use. Like you got free access to it, which is amazing. It's an online resource. It's very, very robust. Like there's tons of material in this thing, and it's free. And so like my thing is like, hey, I just like to let pastors in our state know that it's available, because I think a lot don't. And some already have like a pipeline for raising up disciples, making disciples, for raising up leaders, maybe even for raising up planters, but some don't. If you do, great. If you don't, man, this is a resource that's free, that you can have, that you can tap into, that you can look at. Even if you have something else, I would still encourage a church to sign up for this, because then they can really see it as maybe something that supplements or adds to what they might already have existing in place. And so there's 3 levels to it, and I'll share my screen here so you can just kind of see the different levels.
Great. Yeah.
All right. Can you see that there?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is just really goes over the 3 different levels of what this material covers. And for the most part, it's 3 different levels. So it's roughly 3 years of content. You could move through it slower, quicker, whatever. Here's the thing, like all of this is fully customizable to your church, to your association, to each context. So that's another huge bonus to the whole pipeline. But there's 3 different levels, pretty much 3 different years. Level 1 is all about discipleship. And so really it's material. You can see 7 sessions there: spiritual formation, Bible fluency, spiritual design, evangelism, relationships, understanding church, servant leadership. It's these 7 different sessions in level 1 to get after discipleship, really helping someone in your church learn how to lead themselves. That's how I like to explain it. So it's really helping somebody learn how to lead themselves, and how do I study the Bible? What is evangelism? What's it look like to serve based on my gifting? What's going on in the church? Like what is the church, and all of this. So it's great material on really helping a disciple, a believer, learn how to lead themselves. Level 2, you can see there that the 8 different sessions on that. Level 2 is all about leadership, and leadership is really these 8 different sessions that help somebody learn how to lead others. So level 1 is learning to lead yourself. Level 2, I like to say, is really learning how to lead others. And it gets after self-awareness, really understanding who they are as a leader, how to communicate and work on a team, and understand the context that they're leading in, like just a spiritual readiness of where they are as a leader, how to actually make disciples and multiply leaders. You can see all the topics on there. But it's great material that just gets after leadership. And then the 3rd level is all about church planting and multiplication. So where level 1 is all about leading yourself, level 2 is all about leading others. Level 3 is all about leading mission. And that gets after what's it look like for someone who has been called to ministry, called to being a pastor, maybe even called to planting. How does it help them process like, am I really called to this? Like, is this what God's doing? Is this where he's leading? And that really helps them discover, are they called to church planting, and helps them learn how to lead mission. And so that's level 1, discipleship. Level 2, leadership. Level 3, church planting. And again, it's just a ton of material that's all online, filled with videos and questions and responses and articles to read, and like chapters of a book to read, but it's all online. So you can just kind of work through and click through it. I think I said this before, but it's free. Like it's available for any church that would be interested in using this. And so we can sign a church up for this, and they can have access to to the whole thing. And again, all of it is fully customizable, so they can go through and they can be like, hey, level 1, I love this. I want to take out this. I want to add this. And they can do that. It takes a little bit more effort, a little bit more work, but they can do that as well too. And so this is the pipeline. And again, we call it the multiplication pipeline, David, as you mentioned, just because really, at the heart of really what God has called us to, the Southern Baptist Convention, like we want to make disciples, right? And so this is a pipeline that really leads towards disciples making disciples, and leaders raising up other disciples and leaders, and leaders, maybe if they're called to planting or pastoring, going out to plant more churches or pastor a church. And so this is really set up for those kind of things.
So if a church wants to, get into this, do they need to call you, email you? How do they do that?
Yeah, so they can call, email me, but I would say, first of all, to go on to www.namb.net/pipeline. So again, that's nam.net/pipeline. And you can see there's videos on there that introduce the material. There's all kinds of things that you can kind of click on and just kind of check out really even more what this is. If what I said was confusing, you can kind of get a really nice overview. Again, on nam.net/pipeline, but also on there, any church can sign up for pipeline there, just as like, hey, I'm interested. And so fill in your basic contact information with email, and then NAM will reach out to you about that and really just get that ball rolling. And then shortly after that, I get plugged into that as well too, to come alongside a pastor that's here in our state and just help with some of the onboarding process. And so, place to start.
Is there a special like training module for this? Like if, like right now, we're just sort of overviewing some things that you have. Is there a special way that you or somebody can come along and say, hey, we're going to have a special training for this on whenever?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, we can totally do that. We also have a regional equipper at NAM, and our regional equipper is in our region, which is Ohio, Michigan, Indiana. And his name is Jim Scott, and he does a lot of help with some of this pipeline onboarding. And so between him and myself, we can really help any church, serve any church in any way, or I would even say this, David, serve any association, maybe even as well in any way to help with onboarding. And because I think like another thing that's great about pipeline is churches can use it in their own context. But also I think the beauty of pipeline is churches can use it together if they need to, if maybe the resources or the personnel aren't quite there to pull it all off themselves, right? And so like it can be really used as in like churches coming together to raise up leaders to go through level 2, or an association coming together. It's like, we've got a guy, a Nate Your Gates, right? It's like, we got this guy, and together, like we just want to pour into him together. And so we're going to together work through level 3 with him. Like that kind of stuff can happen. And so it's not like you have to go through level 1 and then level 2 and then level 3. Like, again, you can pick and choose and use all of this material as whatever's best for you and your context, your association, whatever it might be.
Okay, that's really cool. Rick, any questions?
Well, no, I remember when this was introduced, Tony Lynn, shared it with me, and I just very excited about it. And I think that it's really neat because it can be customized. And like you say, if the church is at a point where they need to start at 3, they can do that. My concern is that at Emmanuel, and I need to interpret it to the contextual to my area. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I would love to have more people in the church where level 1, where they would actually be part of that and do that and grow with that. I only know maybe 2 or 3 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you might not, Rick, at Emmanuel, you only have maybe 10 people there that are even online.
I think that's true. It's improving. I mean, because the most improvement that we've seen in this church and other churches is grandparents with grandkids. They get it online so they can communicate with the grandkids, but they're pretty limited. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, just kind of on that subject, I think, one of the things of just onboarding, that can be one of the things that can take some extra time, but just what we've seen with that, we've got some, I think the more intentional that we can be on the front end to help those that are jumping in, just kind of walk them through that. Again, it can take some more time, but I think what we've seen is once people get in, that they can kind of poke around and click around and they can really get familiar with it pretty quick. But really, my encouragement is, even if it's one person that's interested or two people that are interested, in my mind, that's a win. That's a win. And so for me, it's like, yes, this pipeline goes towards level 3 is church planting. And so does it all lead towards church planting? Well, maybe. But if like someone goes through level 2 and it's like that's where God takes them and they grow as a leader and they choose to stay in a church and not go out and plant a church or pastor a church, but they want to stay in the church and in the context, win. Yeah. That's a massive win, because now we have greater leaders in our current context and in our churches. And so, so that's another, I think, bonus of just this whole pipeline.
Yeah, that's good, brother. I think maybe we'll want to hear more details about this for sure. Sometime from you. So thanks for sharing that.
For sure. Yeah. And as if other guys watch this video and got questions on it, they can reach out to me and I can give my email address here, or David, I can make sure that you have my contact info as well too. And so they can, anybody can call me on my cell phone, shoot me an email, whatever is best. But I can give that as well. I'll give it here real quick. Email is M as in Matt. So M Thompson, THOMPSON @nam.net. Again, that's M Thompson @nam.net. So that's my email address. And shoot an email and I'll get right back to you on that. But then my cell phone number is 616-202-8707. Again, that's 616-202-8707. And I'm usually pretty quick to respond to texts as well too. But yeah, really just any way I can serve David and any of your pastors up there in the area, just to help onboard or to intro this, or if it would be helpful to do an event up there to talk more about this and to show it up on a screen or whatever. Just let me know. Really, I'm here. This is my full-time job to serve pastors here in our state. Yes, to discover, develop, deploy church planters, but part of discovering and developing church planters, it is pipeline stuff. And so that's more churches that we can have in using this free resource. I think it's a win. So.
Well, that's cool, man. So could you explain, in just a few minutes, like what church planting training is that this is not, and the church planting pathway?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I'll start with the church planting pathway, and I'll share a different thing if that's okay.
Okay.
So let me share this with you. Yeah, so this right here is, can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So this right here is our church planting pathway. And so where we have this pipeline that leads up to helping, level 3, like we just talked about, church planting, developing a church planter, helping them kind of discover, is the Lord calling them to church planting? If for them, like going through that, it's like, yes, this is what the Lord is calling us to do. This is where the Lord is calling us to, the step that he's calling us to take. Then that really leads them to this planting pathway. And so it's like, hey, there's this funnel, there's this pipeline that leads to planting or raising up leaders, but planting. And then it's like, yep, called towards planting. Okay, so then what's the pathway for them? Like, what path are they going to walk down? And so that's really what this is. This is the planting pathway. And just really quickly, you can see here, there's 5 different things, but it's this application and assessment process, and it's orientation, training, which David, you mentioned, and I'll talk about that here in a second, but training, and then coaching and care. And so at the North American Mission Board with Send Network, we have this really, this big assessment application process for any pastor planter that's considering church planting. And Nate's going through that right now. You just brought his name up earlier, Rick, but it's this whole assessment process that really dives into their calling, their ministry experience, them making disciples, raising up leaders, really preaching, and all of these different things, emotional, spiritual health, family dynamics, all of these different areas of really getting into the nitty gritty, if I'm honest, of each of these men that they believe that the Lord is calling them to planting. And we just want to come alongside and encourage them in that, or help them really confirm, assess that, to come alongside and say, yes. But as we know, none of us are Jesus. And so there's areas where there's strengths, but then there's also areas that we've got growth areas. And so the assessment process really is one of those things that helps bring greater awareness for each of our future planters on, strength areas, but also growth areas. And we use really that assessment report. Every guy that goes through assessment, they get a 15 to 25 page report from the assessors that really highlight all of these areas. And so it's like guys are going in now to planting just with greater awareness of who they are as a leader, who they are as a pastor, who they are as a husband, who they are as a dad, to make them really to really be a more healthy church planter. Again, what's our vision? To plant a healthy, multiplying church in every community throughout North America. And so if we're going to plant a healthy, multiplying church, it involves a healthy church planter or pastor, right? Yeah. And so that's part of really what the assessment gets after. But then as they go through that, if they pass assessment, then from there, there's this orientation, and we fly them down to North American Mission Board main headquarters down there in Alpharetta, Georgia, and they get to go down there and be with this last one. We had 165 church planters, and so there were 164 other church planters at that one that are all in the same stage, all just went through assessment, all like on the brink of starting what God has called them to do. And they're down there all together, and we just get to pour into them, encourage them as our church planters, Southern Baptist church planters. And it's a great time of really just helping them see what they're a part of, see what they're jumping into. But we also use it to go over our 3 values of the Send Network, which is family. Hey, we're all in this together. Multiplication. We want to be churches that are planting churches. And then restoration. We're planting churches in a community to help meet the needs of the community, ultimately by sharing the gospel, but also being an encouragement to the city and the people that we're serving in the city. And so that's some of the restoration stuff. And so really, we just want guys to get that as they're jumping in. So that's the orientation. And that's just a 2-day, 3-day event. But then after that, you can see training as part of this pathway. Training is, we've got them for 6 months, and we work them through 6 months of church planter training. And NAM, like with all the resources that are available to the North American Mission Board, they did a crazy study just over as they looked at the landscape of what was happening in North America. They surveyed some of the most healthy multiplying church planters that we had. And from that, they boiled all of this research and all of the study down to 11 core competencies of a church planter, of a healthy church planter. And the training that we take every one of our planters through goes through those 11 core competencies. And so it's helping them really assess and see where they're at based on these 11 core competencies, but also part of those core competencies is helping them get their vision, their mission, their values, helping them really be ready for launching and starting this church that God has called them to. And so that's what the training goes over. They go through that in a cohort kind of setting where they're with a handful of other planters that are planting here in our state. And myself and a couple other church planters in our state lead that. And it's just it's an incredible time going through that training with those planters. And so that leads them up close to starting their church. And then after they start their church, we provide ongoing coaching and ongoing care for each of our planters for 4 to 5 years, depending. And so that's financial support for sure, but the coaching is having somebody that's in their corner, that's cheering them on, that's really asking them questions, being an asking voice in the sea of all of the telling voices that they get in the church and maybe from their sending church or whatever. And so it's a coach that's there to ask, how are you doing? How are things going? What are you processing right now? What are some obstacles that are, so it's an asking voice in the midst of all of these telling voices. That's what coaching is for us. And then also we're providing, as you can see there, we're providing care. And church planting is tough. I tell every one of my church, one of the first conversations I have is this: hey, just so you guys know, church planting is spiritual warfare. Yeah. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. The enemy hates what you're doing and what you're jumping into. He does. Right. Yep. He wants to discourage you. He wants to distract you. He wants to bring doubt. He wants to bring disappointment. He wants to divide between you and your wife and just like go down the list. Right. And so that we can provide care for these planters. NAM does that on a national level in an incredible way. And over this last year, I've been really working to do that in a greater way here, boots on the ground care for our planters in our state. And we're pulling together a team right now that is filled with past pastors, guys that have counseling backgrounds that are just top-notch, top-level pastors of pastors to be on this care team, as well as their wives, to care for the spouses as well too, because they're a huge part of this. And so that's part of the care aspect as well too, which honestly is a big part of my heartbeat. Just to care for our planters, because some of these guys, as you know, they're going out and they're planting a church, and up to this point they've had a lead pastor that's been pouring into them this whole time, and now they go out as the lead planter pastor, and this is the first time where they feel like they're out and nobody's pouring into them. Well, we know that's what the sending church is for, but also what's it look like for us to have a care team as well too, to come alongside of them and to care for them and to help in any crisis, but just really to be there to pray for them and encourage them in their planting journey. And so that's the planting pathway.
So Matt, with the pathway, I mean, that's really ideal. That's really a nice way for things to move.
Yep.
But sometimes I would guess that you're going to have a few guys that are planting. Mm-hmm. And maybe they've already launched, they already have a church, and but they want to hitch their wagon to NAM and the state Sin Network, and they don't exactly fall into the plan exactly right. How does that work?
For sure.
I think isn't that what Saginaw Valley did?
With the replant? Yeah, I'm not sure how that came together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for them, I mean, there's components of each, and they got to contextualize obviously where they're at and in the process, but there's elements of each of this, David, I would say that is still crazy valuable. I mean, a lot of guys jump in because they feel like nobody's in their corner. And so we have to say, hey, you've already launched for sure. But I encourage them, hey, you got to go to, obviously they go through assessment to be a part of things, but go to orientation so that you can hear what it is that, the team that you're now on, that you're a part of, like, you got to hear that. But then also it's like, go through training, and I've seen it's helpful as we've led training that there are guys every time you're nailing it every time that have already launched or about to launch, and so there's different guys on the end of that spectrum, but each perspective just makes that training even more healthy and beneficial. And so any guy, no matter where they're at, needs the coaching and the care, I would argue. And so to be able to provide that for a guy that maybe has already launched, we've just seen, hey, that's an extra benefit and bonus of being a part of Send Network. And so
within the training. So in the training, do they teach men how to do church? I mean, do they teach them how to, I mean, preaching, I mean, a lot of people can preach and teach, but do they teach how to pastor, how to be the pastor to the people? And I mean, how to make sure the books are being done properly? Is that within the training?
Yeah, some of that's within the training, some of it is leading up to launch. And so it's some of the even systems and structures of like, hey, how are you going to make disciples? How are you going to, what's your plan to engage the community? Those different kinds of things as well too. But the exciting part, I think, about this is some of those maybe other things that aren't necessarily included. Like they've just now gone through a 6-month intensive training with some experienced church planters, but also guys that are in it at the same. And so there's some crazy networking that happens just even in that of like, I got no way to do my books. Other guys do. Like our sending church is doing that, but some guys don't. And so like those kind of things are always coming up in that cohort, which is just like, where do I go? Who do I do? And so to have that is just so helpful. Also, I would say NAM has just rolled out a whole bunch of benefits, new benefits for each of our planters. It's pretty crazy what all involves, just even with some health insurance and life insurance, retirement. It's pretty crazy, but even with that, there's some things with helping with funding and different aspects of that as well too. And so it's like what we're a part of, and like the more, again, I've just been in it for over a year, but like the more I'm in it, the more I'm seeing it, the more of like what's involved. It's pretty incredible what we get to be a part of. Obviously, as you guys know, as Southern Baptist, but just the cooperative program, it's pretty amazing just what God is doing through all of that to do an incredible gospel work here in North America.
Amen. So on the coaching part of the pathway, I know Dan Russell down in Southeastern Association, he's been involved with that. How do you get coaches? Number one, I can see that role is sort of complementary to what I'm trying to do here. But how do you get them, and how do they get trained, I guess, to do that?
Yeah, for sure. No, good question. So Dan Russell was involved with that. Over this past summer, he stepped down from that. I think he was just going to focus more on some of the roles that he had there in his current context. So had this last November, Brian Kent. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
Compass Church, right out of Lansing, Mason, Michigan. He jumped in this last November. And so he's been onboarding really November, December, hitting the ground here in this new year of being our, what we call a coaching champion. And so he's the coach of coaches, is really what he's doing and what Dan was doing. But for us, we're really looking at, okay, who are all of our coaches? I think there's two things that are primary in this, are like, where are our coaches? Because we know that we're going to have planters everywhere, right? So like, where are our coaches, but also who are our coaches? And I want to really process where our coaches are, because for me, like my area is, again, everywhere outside of Detroit. So there's cities, large cities, but there's also suburbs, there's rural areas, there's farming, like, and so for me, like, if I can have a coach, like, this is where it's going. If we can have coaches that really know well those different contexts, then if I have a planter that comes out and is planting in a rural area, I'm going to team him up with a coach. Brian, we're going to team him up with a coach that gets that context, because yes, church planting is church planting, but then there's these different areas that it's like, hey, to have a coach that's actually planted a church in that kind of setting as well too, I believe is just all the more helpful. And so we're really wanting to get pretty specific on our coaching and who we're teaming up based on who the planter is as well too. And so that's kind of some of the strategy of moving forward. But with the North American Mission Board, like I've shown kind of in all of this planting pathways and, multiplication pipeline, there's a whole onboarding for each coach. And Brian is going to be leading that as well too. And again, it's online material to help onboard coaches for being an effective coach for our planters. So.
Okay. So do you guys recruit coaches, or you wait for them to come to you, or how's that work?
Yeah, so we're in a season of recruiting. I was just actually talking with Tony Lynn this morning, just a little bit about that. And Brian and I have been talking, and I think for us, kind of where we're at right now. So in our state, we have about 55 church planters. That's in our whole state. About half of those are in Detroit, about half are outside of Detroit. And so for me, if we could be anywhere, 20, if we could have 20 solid planters, because coaching is just for 2 years. So if we have 20 solid coaches, that I think that would be a massive win. Ones that really get what we're wanting to get after. Ones that, for me, it's like, hey, our planter is excited to have them in their corner, I think is a big win. And so we're really wanting to look at this whole thing, all of our coaches that we have, and onboard new coaches based on some of the areas of where we see God working and moving. It's like we need some more guys in Flint, because God is doing some neat things in the greater Flint area, to be honest. And so we need some more coaches over there. And so it's just kind of also dependent upon, hey, who's going through assessment, where they're going to be planting, where we need a coach, who they're sending churches. Is there somebody there, not there? And so it's kind of this morphing kind of thing as well too, but also one that we're really wanting to go in a even more healthy direction, building off of what Dan's done for the number of years, to jump in as well and have Brian just kind of take that helm and keep her going. So
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, man, this has been a lot, but it's been good. And I hope our guys will watch this. And once we put the link up, and Rick, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, just, I think it's great. I think that, I really like the direction. I think that, maybe 6-7 years ago, the church planting was too numbers oriented. And with unrealistic numbers, without consideration of population. This is great. I'm excited about what's being offered, both in planting, replanting, and revitalization. Many of our churches can't multiply because they're holding on to the lifeline, some of them. So we need to realize how to help them first, I believe. But it's great. My wife Diana and I were asked to be coaches a couple of years ago, and we're headed to the training, but there's a big snowstorm, so we weren't able to go. And then the need time they planned it, we kind of assessed what we're doing and realized, we don't have the capacity to do that right now. But coaching is great. I mean, the idea of calling some guy and say, hey, let's get together for coffee, and oh, how's it going? That's a one-on-one that is really needed. And some pastors, especially in rural areas, don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's great. And I work with Brian, different committees throughout the state, and with the Compass Church, I excited about what they're doing there. So, there's many great things going on throughout the state.
Yeah.
But the Bay Area, where we're at right now, they need a spark. They really need something. Churches with 12 people attending, it's like, what can we do for them?
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah.
David, what are some of your, unless you guys got to go here, but what are some of your thoughts on that? Like, as you think about the association, the area, the churches there, and you've heard a lot of, some of the stuff that we've talked about today, or even other things, that you're getting after. What's just kind of, what are you thinking, processing based on that area?
Well, we're largely, I would say a more town and country association. We do have a lot of rural areas, farmlands. But then we do have the Tri-Cities, you know, and we've got some other cities like Mount Pleasant with a university and whatnot. I guess I'm glad that Nate is interested in church planting and that he's trying to move in that direction. I have another guy here in our association, Terry Wilson. I don't know if he's contacted you or not, but he's also looking at planting, and we just really want to come alongside these guys with everything we can and encourage them and equip them and do whatever role we can have to help move them forward. And I guess I've been disappointed that churches in our association, some that I thought would be really interested in planting churches haven't. And I don't know if they have this thinking that, well, until we get enough people and enough money and enough resources and all these things, that we really can't do it. I just don't agree. Personally, my theology is you start doing what God's already told you to do, and then he's going to supply what you need as you do that. So I don't know. And then I like I guess my role I see is sort of helping point churches to resources that are there for them, networking them together, connecting them. Pastoral fellowship, you know, we don't want any lone rangers out there. We don't want guys feeling like they're out there on their own, doing their own thing. Some guys want that, but I don't think that's very healthy. And then I do like coaching. I've done a little bit of that, just some hybrid versions of coaching with like Blackaby's model and a little bit of NAM's, Dino's stuff. And then this whole revitalization replant thing. I think we have a few churches in our association that they better start revitalizing, or it's going to turn into a replant.
Right.
Before it's too late. So, and Rick's at one where they're probably looking at replant unless something changes.
The problem there is that to replant, you need you need resources to start with.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I mean, they're financially stable, and I've seen several churches that have been financially stable until, you know, that one couple who goes south for, 4 to 5, 6 months a year says, you know what? Why are we going to Michigan?
I know.
And then another couple who, are gone for 8 weeks, and it's like, they have more family down in Florida than they have here. So, that's the things that that concern me. Anyway, so I think that, talking about your churches being multiplying churches and replanting and wanting to wait till they can afford it, it's kind of like having kids. You think you can really have kids, like you're not gonna have kids.
It's waiting to get married or having kids till you can afford it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
never
will.
In that order, by the way. In that order.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at, Matt. What do you think?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think, just even thinking through, and I don't know if this is helpful, just even for things there, but, just we've got this training that we do. And so for me, it's like, I'm looking at these, 11 core competencies as we're training up a planter. I know that I don't have all 11, right? But I know that there are pastors in our state that have aspects of each of those.
Sure.
And so for me, like my mindset is, and I'm just letting you a little bit behind my thinking in the curtain here of like this training is like, man, like I want to pull in Josh Tovey to talk about, when we go over vision, I want him to talk about vision, because just as we get into that, like it just oozes out of him. That's who he is, and it's like, man, I'm going to call Austin Wadlow down at, Commons Church in Lansing to talk about, right. And so it's like, what's it look like for us? I'm just thinking, what's it look like to pull together pastors to help, do this training, but also they're actually serving out of their expertise or their niche or their thing that they're wiring. And so now my planters get the best of all of these other pastors throughout our state. Okay, so that's my mindset. But I say that to say this: could that same kind of mentality happen in an association as well, where maybe it's like collectively we get to together we get to raise up a planter, and you know, we're gonna, David is gonna lead this aspect, and Rick is gonna lead this aspect, and you know, go down the list of pastors, where it's like now the planter that's being raised up, he's actually now connected with not just what's going on at Emmanuel, nothing wrong with that, but now he's connected with 7 other churches in our state that now our churches can come alongside, pour into, encourage, support, pray, all of that, but then also maybe send out in a more healthy way. And now this planter actually has 7 churches in his corner rather than just one. You know, so I'm just wondering if like a mentality or a thought like that could be helpful. Yes, no, like what's your initial kind of thought to, or is that just like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but when it comes down to it, nah, that's more of a, I don't know.
No, I think that the idea of multiple churches planting a church, that's great. And I don't know that many churches think about that. So that'd be something good to encourage.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be good. I just, it has been hard for me, and I know it's not all just on me. The Lord has to do it, but I feel like it's been hard to get churches to think bigger, you know, to think that, yeah, we can do more together than we can do on our own. So, so Matt, we might just have to have you come up here sometime to one of our pastors' events and let you take an hour plus and just share some of this with them about how to rethink maybe some things, how we're doing it or how we're not doing it, and how we could be.
I think that'd be good.
If you'd be open to that, we'd be interested in figuring that out.
For sure. And just so you guys know, please, like, I don't have the answers. I really don't. Okay, so like,
wait a minute. What's up?
all that to say, no, but like, you know, any kind of like, hey, let's discover this together. Let's talk through this together. Again, my mind works like system structure kind of thing.
Well,
stuff. So it's like any of that I can be helpful with as well too.
Yeah.
For the association or for any pastor, like let me know. Let me know. So we here at Redemption, we think through, and maybe this could be helpful, David, just for what's going on up there. But at Redemption, we process everything through 4 words. And the 4 words are, I'll give you a second to maybe grab a pen if you want to write these down. But we process everything through awareness, vision, strategy, and courage. So I'll give you those 4 words again: awareness, vision, strategy, and courage. And awareness really is, and just so you guys know, I pulled this on you today and maybe you didn't even realize it. Okay. But we started talking about awareness, like what's going on in the Bay Area Association, right? So it's like, there are some of those questions of like, what awareness is what's the current state of things? All right. What's the good? Because there's good. What's the bad? What's the ugly? That's awareness. What's the current state of things? And so that's where you're at. But then the other end, the next word is vision. Vision is where you're going. Vision is what could be, what should be biblically. This isn't just like our good ideas. You know, this is like, what is God calling us to? That's vision. So it's like, what could be, what should be biblically. So there's awareness on one end. The other end is vision. But we can just look at this and be like, this is where we're at. Vision, this is where we need to go. But then the third word, strategy, is how are we going to get there? Right? But what are the steps that we need to implement to move towards the vision? Does that make sense? So it's like awareness, this is where we're at. Vision, this is where we're going. Strategy is how we're going to get there. And then that last word is courage. And it's this: are we going to do anything about this? Like, are we going to do anything about really where we're at, where God wants us to be, how we can get there. We can look at that and have a great conversation and a great dialogue on all of that. But if we don't have the courage to make the next step or to take a step, then really it's just maybe a good conversation, right? And so
Yeah.
we use that here at Redemption. We use that for our counseling. A guy will come in and it's like, the marriage is a mess. Hey, where are you guys at? All right, that's awareness. Where are you going? What's God have for you biblically as a husband, as a wife, as a couple? Okay, what are the steps that you need to implement to move closer towards what God wants you to, right? And then the last one, courage. Like, are you going to do anything about this? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing, which, by the way, isn't working, right? And so we use this all over our ministry. And so I just bring that up to say, David, I don't know if something like that could be helpful, just to gather pastors and just to whiteboard a big awareness and vision and strategy and courage and to see what it could look like to talk through some of those things. I'm open to whatever, but that could be something maybe that could be helpful as well too, if you think it would be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I definitely want to get you up here. I'll tell you kind of how we're doing things as far as like connecting pastors and whatnot. We only have 12 churches in our association. Our furthest one east is over in, well, actually, they're not in the association, but Michael Goforth out at Port Austin.
Yeah.
He comes to some of our pastors' meetings, and then our furthest west one is over near Big Rapids. So,
Big area.
we're covering
Yeah.
almost 2/3 of the state, at least in the central part.
Yeah.
So we meet generally the first Monday of the month in Clare at a pizza restaurant where we just sit there for an hour and a half and fellowship, just enjoy being together and talking church and stuff. And then we meet usually the third Thursday now of the month in Bay City at Crossway Church. And we don't usually go out and eat and stuff, but we just have a good time, fellowship, and we're reading through a book and whatnot. What we're hoping to start in the fall is we're going to continue those, but every other month we're going to try to have a combined fellowship of all the guys that can make it to one meeting. And the first hour we want to do some kind of practical ministry help discussion. And then the second hour we wanted to let them be able to hear one of our pastors preach. And then in between, be just fellowship and whatnot. But I'd like to get you to one of those meetings where we're all together.
Yeah.
And I could introduce you to everybody, and then we could kind of let you just help walk. We'll fine tune as we get closer, but whether you want to talk multiplication pipeline or church planting and how maybe we could do collective church planting and just maybe, how it is when if you've had kids, how they behave for you and how they behave for other people. For some reason they behave better for other people.
Wait, not the same?
or people, when I was pastoring, I could bring somebody in to preach a special message or a series or something, and they would listen to him and think, hey, what about this, preacher? And I'm thinking, I've been telling you that for years, and you don't, but sometimes just bringing in somebody out from the outside carries a little weight, and they'll listen. And so maybe that could happen if we bring you up here.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah. And I'm open for whatever. And David, as you just kind of pray through and survey what's going on up there, if there's, if you think there's a way that I could better serve pastors up there than another, let me know. And I'm game. And so, I'd love to come up and be a part of, one of those days, one of those events, and just what God's doing.